G'day all, it's Colin from PC TLC and thanks for joining me. In this video we're going to be installing Ubuntu once again in a dual boot situation with Windows 10. This time will be legacy mode, and I've kept the startup procedure for VirtualBox just to show you the difference with legacy and UEFI. I think I missed this in my part 4 video, I think it was, or one of the booting ones. So let's check that out. Now, in that situation there, we'll choose English to start with. Now, I didn't realize that in VirtualBox, this thing, I didn't even have to use the Control Escape key. This one boots into legacy right there and then. Now, the reason why you probably don't get to choose Try Ubuntu or Install Ubuntu on legacy mode in the live desktop is because you're choosing it from here, and that's probably the reason why. Now, I don't know why, for some reason, in some of my booting options, when booting USB, I got on legacy those two options on the desktop. Not sure how that worked out, but what we're going to do is try Ubuntu without installing. That's what we're going to choose. So here we are on the live desktop of Ubuntu 20.04.2. And first of all, we're going to be starting up the installer. And this is legacy mode. And we'll choose English. My keyboard layout, English US for me. Normal installation, download updates while installing Ubuntu. Saves time after. Install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware. I'm really not sure what the additional media formats are for that. Once again, we get the option of installing Ubuntu alongside Windows 10. Erase disk and install Ubuntu. That will just erase Windows 10 completely and just install Ubuntu to the whole disk. And of course we're going to choose something else because this is a dual boot situation. Now, as you can see, we've got our free space here that we created. So that's our 30 gig unallocated partition there. And once again, we can double click or we can press the plus button. Either way. Now, the difference between legacy and UEFI, we're not going to be making a 512 megabyte boot partition. However, we will do swap. Whether you want to swap partition and commit to a swap partition like I mentioned in UEFI, or you create a swap file after install, you can easily do that as well. So what I'm going to do here is create a 4096 megabyte, which is exactly a 4 gig swap. Actually, sorry, let's cancel that. That's what happens when you work with legacy and UEFI mode. You sometimes forget what you need to do. So first of all, let's hit the plus button. We need to create a logical partition. So let me explain here. Let's cancel that. Already Windows has 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure if they're primary partitions. Let's double check. Oh, we can't check. They're more than likely primary partitions on there. You cannot have any more than 4 primary partitions on an MS-DOS partition table. So anything we create from this point onwards, we need to create 3. So I'm going to create a swap partition, a root partition, and a home partition. Now, the home partition is completely optional. You do not have to do it. You can just do swap and leave the rest as root. So we'll click on the free space, or I'll double click that. I'll leave it as logical. I'm going to create a 4096 megabyte partition. I'm going to use that as swap area. Click OK. And this should create SDA4, I believe, or it could be 5. It's 5 because when you create a logical partition, it seems to step past the 4 and go to 5 for some reason. I'm not sure why it does that. Because we'll probably see this in Gparted when we do the Gparted preparation for the partitions, but I think it creates a main partition which will be SDA4, and then your logicals come off of that, SDA5, 6 and so forth. That's the reason why. So click on the free space. We can click the plus button if we want. It will be logical. I'm going to create a 20 gigabyte partition exactly, which is 20,480 megabytes. It's going to be an ext4 partition, and it's going to be mount point root. Now at that point you could have used the whole remaining whatever you had there. Instead of creating 20,470, you could have just left it as it is and created the whole thing as root. I just want to create an extra one so people can see if people want to create a separate home partition, they know how to do that. So once again, a logical, and this is what we could have done with the root partition. We could have just left whatever was there. And that's what we're going to do in this situation here. It'd be ext4 file system, and the mount point's going to be /home. Okay, so now we're done. Now this bit here I want to talk about a little bit. I really want to talk about this bit here. Now I went through a phase, I don't know why, where I was device for bootloader, I was using the same partition as the root partition, SDA6, to keep the Windows boot partition separate from the Linux partition. But I don't know why it took me a while to realize that Windows has its own boot in legacy. I think it's this 52 megabyte partition here. So Windows has its own boot partition. So I always thought that if I installed to the SDA, I thought Windows would be using SDA as well, but I don't think they are. I would like someone to let me know if that's right or wrong, because I'm not really sure. But if Windows has its own boot, then it won't be using the SDA. So if we put Linux on the SDA, I think they're still separated. And I think that would have to be the case because I've done some installs. I've installed the bootloader to the same root partition as my Linux install, and I've had to repair it anyway, and it puts it on SDA. Now that's how I'm running my HP EliteBook, and I have been for a long time, and I've updated Windows many times, and it's never been an issue. We're going to select what is set as default anyway, which is the SDA, which is the very start of the disk, and we're going to install, and it explains what we've done here. Let's continue that. Perth, Australia, that's my geographical location, and my name once again, my real name, name the VirtualBox, we'll do L for legacy, VM. Now the reason why I did that, let's just say I had two computers on my home network. The UEFI install, I just called it Ubuntu 20.04 VM. Now if this was another computer on my home network, which it would be being in a VM, if I was looking at computers and sharing files or something like that, I'd want to know which one I'm sharing to. Is it the legacy one or is it the UEFI one? So the one with the L would be the legacy one, and I can identify which computer that is on the home network. So that's sometimes important what you name that. And my password. And let's continue. And that is the install complete using the Ubuntu installer. Let's restart now and make sure that that's dual booting with Windows 10. And there we have the grub menu to select Ubuntu or to select Windows 10. So that's worked fine. That's boot Ubuntu. And we have the Ubuntu login screen. And I don't think you'll find any differences between legacy and UEFI from this point onwards, I wouldn't think. You can connect your online accounts. I'm going to skip that. You can set up live patch, which allows you to do certain updates that may need restarting, in which if you set up live patch, you don't need to restart. I won't send a report to Ubuntu because it's a VM. Otherwise, I'd just be annoying them with all these VM installs. And privacy location services, which allows applications to determine your geographical location. And you're ready to go. You can open software from here if you want to start installing packages. Otherwise, we are done. And you have this little arrow thing here to check out certain software that they've got up on display here. And we're done. So let's restart this one and choose Windows 10. Windows 10, and there's our login screen for Windows 10. Let's quickly log into that. And we are on the desktop of Windows 10. And let's shut that down. So next we're going to be installing Ubuntu once again. This time we'll be preparing the partitions with gparted. Just one thing there, if you miss your language selection there, you can press F2 for language, and there's your language. You can escape that and choose one of the options here. Boot from first hard disk, test memory, install Ubuntu safe graphics, install Ubuntu, try Ubuntu without installing safe graphics, try Ubuntu without installing. So here we are on the desktop of Ubuntu 20.04.2 once again. We're going to open up gparted. This is legacy mode. There's our unallocated space. What we're going to do is create a new partition. And what we have to do here, the installer allows us to just choose logical, but we need to create an extended partition here, and then we can make logicals after that. So we have to use the whole disk space to create an extended partition. Like I said, you cannot create more than 4 primary partitions on an MS-DOS partition table. So that's why we have to make an extended. It does it automatically in the installer, but here we have to select extended for the whole partition and add that. And that's why it jumps from SDA 1, 2, and 3 for Windows. This one will be SDA 4. So that's why the newest ones will start at 5, because the new extended will be SDA 4. I don't think it reads as SDA 4, but it probably sees it as that and then skips to the next number. If we have a look here at the view device information, you will see that it's an MS-DOS partition table. So now we can right click and select new, or we can go to partition and new. Let's do that. We'll create a 4096 megabyte partition and it's a logical partition, and it will be Linux swap. That doesn't allow me to put partition name in there, so we'll call that swap. Add that. Right click, select new, 20,480. Enter that. Logical partition. It'll be an ext4, and this will be root. Add that. Partition and new. Once again, you could have left. Let's just go back one, undo the last operation. Let's go new. I keep forgetting to explain here that we can leave this whole thing, whatever the rest of your partition is, you can leave the whole thing, and you can just use that as root if you want. 2480, logical, ext4, and that's root. And as you can see, it's exactly 4 gig, exactly 20 gig. This one here, the rest of the unallocated space, partition, new, that will be ext4, and that will be home. Add that, apply that, and apply that. So that's how the extended partition works. Once you've got an extended partition, every other partition you make off of that is a logical partition. And that's successfully completed. We don't have to do any flags or anything like that. I'm pretty sure the installer works out the flags for you, although the root partition, manage flags, I'm sure the Ubuntu installer will sort that out. We don't put any boot flags on that. I don't normally put boot flags for that. I let the installer manage that itself. So let's close gparted. Now, if anyone does do boot flags in that scenario, I'd be interested to know. I don't normally do that. I've had no issues. English continue for me. Keyboard layout is English US for me. Once again, normal installation, download updates, and install the third-party software. Does anyone know what the media formats are? I've never really taken much notice of that. I know they do support for graphics cards and Wi-Fi for your hardware. I'm not sure what media formats they do here. I've never really taken much notice of that. Let's continue. So once again, we get the option of installing Ubuntu alongside Windows 10. And like I've explained before, if you do that, they'll probably be sharing the same boot partition, I would think. That's why I don't do it that way. You can erase disk and install Ubuntu. That erases everything and gets rid of Windows. Just has Ubuntu on the whole disk. But in our dual boot situation, we're going to select something else. Now it's a matter of selecting our partitions, which is 5, 6, and 7. So 5 is swap. We just leave that because it'll be recognized as swap. Select this partition here, which will be our root partition. And we can click change, or we can double click, same thing. So we're going to use it as ext4. We will format it. We'll select it as the root partition and OK. Now, it doesn't show you any flags here or any names of partitions in the installer here. So because when you're new in Linux, sometimes it's hard to remember what's what. So just make sure you write down once it's in gparted, it's done. You can write down SDA6 is my root, SDA5 is my swap, SDA6 is my root, and SDA7 is my home. Just in case you don't remember. Double click that, or we can go change, and that will be ext4 file system. We'll format that. Like I said before, if you've got an existing home, let's select that as home. If you've got an existing home and you're doing a fresh install, just do not format it. And make sure you're using the same desktop environment. That's very important. So /home, OK. And there we have our root partition, our home partition, and device for bootloader installation will be the very start of the disk, SDA, and Windows, I believe, has its own boot partition. So they should be kept separated anyway. Like I said, my HP EliteBook has been running a dual boot situation for many years, and I've reinstalled Windows, I've reinstalled Peppermint, and I still have no problems. And that's install now. And it just tells us what everything is here, and continue. Australia Perth is my geographical location, my real name, Ubuntu 20.04-L for legacy, which is what I did in the last one, VM. Bit of a long-winded name, to be honest. And my password. And continue. And that is the install complete of Ubuntu 20.04 using gparted to prepare the partitions. Let's restart now, make sure I've done everything correctly. And we have exactly the same as what we had just using the installer. Windows 10 option there and Ubuntu up top. So let's boot Ubuntu first. And there we are at the login screen of Ubuntu. Let's log into that. Same procedure with the little welcome screen here. Connect your accounts online if you wish. Live patch to be able to do updates without restarting. And I will not send any information to Ubuntu on this occasion. It's a VM. Location and privacy allows applications to determine your geographical location, if that works for you. And also they've got this software here on display. It's just to show you particular software that's available in Ubuntu, and you can open software from there. So we are done. That's Ubuntu installed, booting no problem at all. So let's power off, restart, and we have the option of selecting Windows 10. Let's do that. And we are at the login screen of Windows 10. Let's log into that. And there we are in the desktop of Windows 10. And let's shut that down. And that concludes the installs of Ubuntu in legacy mode and dual booting with Windows 10. So one thing I'd like to mention here is, so during the creation of the partitions in gparted, I don't set any boot flags on that. I'm pretty sure I have seen some people do that in the past. I'm not really sure. But I think you could set a boot flag on the root partition because that's the partition that you're going to be booting. I'm not sure about that. I think boot flags are only for the partition that's booting itself. But normally if you're setting SDA as the boot I don't think boot flags are necessary. I'm not 100% sure. I've never done it, never had any issues. I would certainly like to know what your thoughts are on that. Be interested to know. Anyway, that concludes the install of Ubuntu 20.04.2 and dual booting with Windows 10 in legacy mode. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it interesting and informative. And thanks for watching. And in the next video, part 7, I'll be installing Ubuntu using the Calamares installer in UEFI mode. So I will see you in part 7.